is 1 hour 30, Universal Time. I'm Jim Tedder in Washington. Rebels in Nepal have declared a 3-month ceasefire. They announced the ceasefire after the new Prime Minister promised them that elections would be held for a new assembly. The rebels said the truce is meant to get political parties to write a new constitution. The constitution would limit the king to a ceremonial part in ruling the country. Earlier, the rebels ended a closure of roads around Kathmandu and major towns. However, they warned that they would re-establish the closure if parliament members do not announce plans for elections Friday. The United States military says its soldiers killed 12 suspected militants and a woman near Baghdad Wednesday. They were killed during a raid on a house in the area of Yusufia. Also in Iraq, American Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld have made a surprise visit to Baghdad. They met with Iraq's newly appointed Prime Minister Jawad al-Maliki. Later, Mr. Rumsfeld said, "The withdrawal of American troops from Iraq will depend on the effectiveness of the new government." 2 bombers were killed when they exploded 2 separate bombs in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. The bomb attacks were aimed at a vehicle carrying peacekeeping troops and Egyptian police officers. Spokesmen for the peacekeepers say there were no injuries among the troops. The peacekeepers guard the border between Egypt and Israel. There has been no confirmation of earlier reports of a 3rd attack that reportedly took place in Egypt's Nile Delta. The nuclear chief of Iran has met in Austria with top officials from the International Atomic Energy Agency. In 2 days, the agency is to present a report about Iran's nuclear activities to the United Nations Security Council. The United States and the European Union have accused Iran of seeking to develop nuclear weapons. Iran denies the accusation. Earlier Wednesday, top Iranian leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said American interests around the world would be harmed if the United States attacks his country. On Tuesday, he said Iran is prepared to share nuclear technology with other nations. Thousands of Sri Lankans are fleeing their homes following government airstrikes aimed at Tamil rebel positions. Reports say at least 15 people were killed during the airstrikes. The airstrikes reportedly were meant to answer a shell attack by rebel fighters. On Monday, a bomber killed himself and wounded the country's army commander. At least 8 people were killed in the explosion. Officials blame the bombing on rebels. A spokeswoman for European truce observers says Sri Lanka will return to war if the violence is not stopped immediately. You are listening to the news in VOA Special English. People in Ukraine and Belarus have been remembering the nuclear accident at the Chernobyl Power Center 20 years ago. Bells rang early Wednesday at the exact time of the explosion that spread radiation across Europe. The explosion is considered the world's worst civilian nuclear accident. Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko attended a ceremony at the Chernobyl Center. He remembered people who died after working to stop radiation from leaking into the air. Earlier in Kiev, he joined a memorial service at a religious center to honor emergency workers who died immediately after the accident. In Belarus, at least 7,000 demonstrators called for freedom in the capital, Minsk. Opposition leader Alexander Milinkevich took part in the event. Lawyers for the government had warned him not to attend. In Liberia, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf has increased security in the capital, Monrovia, after violent demonstrations Tuesday. The president told police to arrest the protest organizers. Former government soldiers are protesting to demand back pay. Ms. Sirleaf also banned street sales of gasoline in bottles. The protesters threw rocks and damaged vehicles outside the Defense Ministry building. UN peacekeepers fired into the air to break up the crowd. The former soldiers were demanding to be paid for their service in Liberia's long civil war. The war ended in 2003. The United Nations Security Council has met to discuss a UN peacekeeping force for the troubled Darfur area of Sudan. A UN official presented two possible plans to replace the African Union force now in Darfur. UN official Hedi Anabi noted that the Sudan government would not permit a UN planning team to visit the area. One plan calls for a strong ground force. The other plan depends more on air power. African Union officials have proposed a peace agreement to the Sudanese government and rebel groups from the Darfur area. Negotiators are urging the opposition to end 3 years of fighting and violence. AU officials have told all sides in the Darfur conflict to reach an agreement by Sunday. 2 United States congressmen have called on the United Nations Security Council to take action against Burma. The request followed reports that Burma's military rulers have displaced more than 11,000 civilians. The people were forced to leave their homes in recent months. An aid group that works inside the country said attacks against the minority Karen community have increased since March. The group, the Free Burma Rangers, said government troops have burned villages and killed civilians in at least 2 Karen areas. Briefly, here again is the major news. Rebels in Nepal have declared a 3-month ceasefire. It came after the new Prime Minister guaranteed elections would be held for the writers of a new constitution. The United States military says its soldiers killed 12 suspected militants and a woman near Baghdad Wednesday. And 2 bomb attacks in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt have killed only the 2 bombers. And that's the news in VOA Special English. This is Jim Tedder reporting.